Hey guys, it is 1:25:21. We're finishing up the pulmonary mechanics lab, not lab, I'm sorry, the pulmonary mechanics lesson. We're going to finish that up today and do a little review. Um, and then that's pretty much it. You can be ready for the exam on tomorrow. There is no lab, so you're just going to come in at your prospective time, take your test, and you can go. Okay. Alpha students are able to come tomorrow at 1 and take your test and leave. Omega students, if you need to come at 4, that's fine. But since we don't have a lab, you can come on in at 2, okay, if you want to. 1 o'clock, they have the test will be open for Alpha students from 1 to about 1:30, right? And so, because you only have 30 minutes to take the test, so I'll make it open from 1 to 2. But if you come in at 1:50, you're going to lose your time. So be on time. But you can take it. It's going to take about 33 minutes to take the test, and then you can go. And so then if Omega students want to come in at 2 o'clock, then that will be fine. You can come in. Your test will be open for you to come in. Now, again, it will be still for those who have made arrangements and can only get here at 4. For those Omega students that can only get here at 4, you still will be able to take it. When the last student has taken the test, then I'm going into class for the day and go home. When the last student has taken the test, we will end the class and go home. So Alpha students be here at 1 o'clock tomorrow for your pulmonary mechanics exam. Remember, if you did not pass the first, the pulmonary A&P, make sure you go to the failed exam one and complete that failed exam practice and review and email a picture of it to me. Okay. All right. Let me share my screen. Going back to ventilation and perfusion. Ventilation and perfusion is very, very important. This is one of the last aspects of the total mechanics. We talked about the fact that we have to ventilate, which is moving air in and out of the lungs. The process of moving air in and out of the lungs is called ventilation. All right? Only when that, hold on one second. All right. Now, what I was saying is ventilation has to occur in order for respiration to occur. Remember, ventilation is the movement of gas in and out of the lungs, just simply the movement. That is ventilation. We talked about the terms that are associated with ventilation because ventilation is our CO2, it is our respiratory, it is an acid, right? It is capnia, carbia, all of that, okay? And so in order for us to have gas exchange, which is respiration, right? Respiration is the process of gas exchanging. CO2 and oxygen are exchanging either internally, which is at the tissue level, or externally, which is in the alveoli to the outside, okay? And so ventilation is very important. Now, we have this ratio that's very important to understand as well, which is the ventilation to perfusion ratio. And that's where we start right here. Number one, ventilation to perfusion. Ventilation to perfusion is also known as VQ. Okay? Ventilation to perfusion. Q is the perfusion. Now, what is perfusion? It is the blood flow. Okay? Perfusion is the blood flow. If we don't have, we have to have both in order for respiration to be good. All right? If you have all of the ventilation but no blood, then that is wasted ventilation. And we said wasted ventilation is called what? Deadspace. Good. Wasted ventilation is called deadspace. Well, what if we have the perfusion, but don't have the ventilation? What's that called? That's a shunt. Yeah, that's a shunt. All right. So let's look at it a little bit because we're going to start talking about these units. All right. Try to keep it low so you guys can see it. All right, so the VQ is ventilation to perfusion. The perfusion is the blood flow, which should be how much? What should perfusion be?
5 liters.
5 liters per minute. Perfusion of 5 liters per minute, that is how much the left side of the heart is able to push blood throughout the body. And that's also called cardiac output. Okay? The output of the left side of the heart to the systemic circulation, it's pumping out 5 liters per minute. That's cardiac output, or also known as the perfusion. So this should be 5 liters, and we say it's cardiac output. That's normal. All right. Now, there's also a normal ventilation, not the whole minute ventilation, but alveolar minute ventilation. Remember, we said the most important aspect of the minute ventilation is what is actually taking place in gas exchange. And that will be your alveolar minute ventilation. So the normal alveolar ventilation should be 4 liters per minute of alveolar ventilation. 4 to 5. 4 liters of alveolar ventilation to 5 liters of cardiac output. That is a normal VQ. That is a normal ventilation to perfusion ratio. But we have disease processes that cause this to be off kilter, right? It could be either a VQ mismatch, a complete shunt, or completely wasted, right? Because we already know that we have, how many types of dead space do we have?
4.
So, Courtney, what is one dead space? What is the dead space called that makes up the conductive airways, Courtney? The dead space or the wasted gas in the conducting zone. What is that dead space called, Courtney? All right, Kiera. Kiera, are you with us?
You mean Key?
No, Kiera.
Okay.
All right, what about Cassidy?
Is it alveolar?
No. We're
Is
talking
it-
about the
I can
conducting.
answer.
Okay, the conducting zone is not alveolar. The alveolar is in the parenchyma, not the conducting zone. So, Kelsey, what is it called?
Anatomical.
Anatomical. The anatomical dead space is from the nose to the terminal bronchioles. That's the whole conducting zone that we talked about on Friday. That's the conducting zone. All that gas in there, none of that is taking place in gas exchange. So that's anatomical dead space. Nothing wrong with it, just anatomically, there's no magic happening in the conducting zone. Then we have another type of dead space. What is that dead space when the alveoli are doing something? When the alveoli is ventilated but not perfused. What is that called, Michaelin?
Alveolar dead space.
Alveolar dead space. Good. All right. So then if you add up alveolar plus the anatomical, Talisha, what is that dead space called? Talisha?
I'm just listening in, Mr. McCarthy.
Did what?
I'm just listening in. It's a really bad time for me. I'm just listening in.
So you don't know the answer?
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
The question is, when I add anatomical plus alveolar dead space, what is that called? If you're not sure, to say I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Charisma. What is that dead space called when it's anatomical plus alveolar?
Physiologic.
Physiologic. Good. And good, Heather. Physiologic. Good. All right. So, Stephanie, what about if I add more circuit or more tubing to the circuit? I just add on a whole nother foot of tubing. What is that dead space called?
Mechanical.
Mechanical. See, so dead space is when you have gas that is not participating in gas exchange. The gas exchange happens in the magic zone, right? The parenchyma, the respiratory bronchioles, and the alveoli, which make up the parenchyma of the lungs, is where the actual gas is exchanging with the capillary blood. All right. And so when we talk about the ventilation perfusion, we're not worried about the ventilation up in the conducting zone. We're only focused on the alveolar ventilation, what's happening in the alveoli, okay? So knowing that, we can now get into the ventilation to perfusion issues. And when is it shunt and when is it dead space, okay? All right. Now, Again, alveolar minute ventilation, guys, is VA, right, equals the tidal volume minus the dead space times the frequency. You got to get the dead space out if we only want to know how much volume is actually participating in gas exchange. If we want to know that, we got to subtract the dead space because we don't care about the dead space, right? All right, so you're going to have these problems. I hope you guys were studying and working on that worksheet, the worksheet that you had. It's either in the module or was added to your packet or whatever, but it has a good breakdown of the volumes and the minute volumes, okay? So like, for instance, tidal volume, right? TV is a volume, right? Just simply a volume. So like this. You got to make sure you know the difference between the volume and the minute ventilation, okay? VT is tidal volume, right? We already learned the formula to find tidal volume if they don't tell us what it is. Who can remember how to find the tidal volume? That's the normal, but how do you find it? What's the formula to find regular tidal volume? Anybody?
It's for, don't you multiply 3 cc's by the pounds?
cc's per pound, right? So tidal volume, if I want to know what it is 3 cc's per pound. Three cc's per pound. Alveolar volume. I'm not talking about alveolar minute ventilation. We're just talking about alveolar volume. So to find alveolar volume is simply the tidal volume minus the dead space volume. That will give us our alveolar volume. Not asking about the minute per minute yet, okay? Just talking about the volume. Tidal volume is all of it. Alveolar volume is the what's in the alveoli, and you have to say the tidal volume minus the dead space. Well, what is the dead space volume? DD. That is dead space volume. And how do we find the dead space volume? Anybody?
Isn't it 1 cc per pound?
cc per pound, good. That is 1 cc per pound. These are the volumes, okay? Not the minute ventilations. Now that we have that, let's talk about the minute ventilations. Minute ventilations, when you, what is the difference? When does it become minute ventilation? What do we do to the problem that makes it become minute ventilation? Only thing we're doing is
you times it by the frequency?
Yeah, we're just multiplying by the frequency. Multiply that volume by frequency, and that's the minute volume of it, right? So minute ventilation is with the dot. Now, on some of your worksheets, it's not going to have the dot because, and that's why the worksheet will explain to you on this section, I want minute ventilation. On this section, I want just volume because it's hard to make the dots in Microsoft, okay? So minute ventilation looks like this, and that is the tidal volume, and now we're going to multiply it by the frequency. Now it becomes minute ventilation. How much of that tidal volume is actually moving in 1 minute, okay? And then alveolar minute ventilation is the tidal volume, like we said, minus the dead space volume and multiplied by frequency. That's the alveolar minute ventilation. These are minutes. Then we also have a dead space minute ventilation. Simply do the dead space times frequency. Now, there's two ways to find dead space minute ventilation. You can either just say the dead space times the frequency, or you can say the minute ventilation minus the alveolar minute ventilation will leave you with the dead space minute ventilation. You can just subtract it. All right, so I hope you guys were looking at these, doing those practice questions. And we'll do a couple today. Now, we're going to now focus on the alveoli and whether the VQ is normal or the VQ is off, right? So normally, let's say a normal alveolar unit will have this. You have a nice open alveoli, right? And you will have a good stream of what? Blood. Yeah, good stream of capillary blood or perfusion. Right? That is a normal unit. You got wide open alveoli and you have a good bloodstream. Perfect. That is a normal alveolar unit. But then, let's look at a dead space unit. Okay, for the dead space unit, charisma. What do we expect to see in a dead space unit? How you want me to draw this charisma?
It's ventilation without perfusion, so just I guess an alveolar with no perfusion around it.
Open alveoli, right?
Mm-hmm. With no perfusion around it.
No perfusion, so I would do it. It's because remember, it's either no or low perfusion, right? The definition of dead space unit is an alveolar unit that has, when you have ventilation in excess of or without perfusion, is a dead space unit. Okay, it's ventilation in excess of or without perfusion. Okay, ventilation in excess of perfusion. So it could be a little bit or it could be none at all. So don't get caught up with just saying, well, I saw a little bit of blood, so it can't be, right? It's in excess, right? So I would do it like this. That would be a dead space unit, right? We got a good open alveoli, but the perfusion is low. The ventilation is way in excess of the perfusion. Okay, that's a dead space unit. All right. A shunt unit Lori, how should I draw the shunt unit? Well, first of all, what is the shunt unit? Okay, so it has so shunt is perfusion in excess of or without ventilation. That is a shunt unit. When you got the perfusion, but you don't have the ventilation, right? You got the perfusion, but you don't have the ventilation. So when that happens, the blood leaves the right side of the heart via the pulmonary artery, right? It goes to the lungs, but it never picks up any oxygen, right? It doesn't pick up oxygen, so it returns to the heart, to the left side, without picking up oxygen. That is a shunt. That's called a right to left shunt, okay? Because the alveoli was closed, right? You got the ventilation. The blood flew real good to the lungs through the capillaries, but the alveoli were closed. So that's going from the right, coming back to the left without picking up oxygen. That's a right to left shunt. So you will have a closed alveoli, right? But you will have plenty of perfusion. You got plenty of perfusion, but it's in excess of ventilation. The ventilation is either closed or real, real small. That's a shunt unit. So I'm about to erase this and do the last one. The last one will be a solid unit. A solid unit. And that is when you have no ventilation and no perfusion. So our solid unit that will be your solid unit. No ventilation, no perfusion. Solid. That's a solid unit. Okay? So now I'm going to ask you a couple questions based on the VQ from what you just we just went over. What? No, I said silent. Yeah, silent. All right, so answer these questions. If I have a VQ of, let's say, 5/1. Don't say it out loud. If I had a VQ of 5/1, what type of unit would that be? That's what I want you to write in the chat. If I had a VQ, which is this is ventilation, this is perfusion. So if I have a 5/1, then what would that be? Put it in the chat. What type of unit would that be? What type of unit? Good, Lori. Michael and good. It's not normal, guys. It's not normal. Remember, I told you what the normal is. It should be almost close. 4 liters of alveolar volume to 5 liters of cardiac output. Now, this one's leaning a certain way. This one has 5 liters of alveolar ventilation and only 1 liter of cardiac output. This would be called a dead space unit. Dead space unit. because we have ventilation in excess of perfusion. That is the textbook definition for dead space. All right. What about if I have a VQ of you had a VQ ratio of 1/5. This, what type of unit would that be? Put it in the chat. Good, Cassidy. Good, Michaelin. Good, Christian. Good, Lori. Whoever iPhone is. Good, Kiera. Stephanie. Good. Christian. Good. Michaelin. I said that. Cassidy. Good. Charisma. Good. Christian. Good. All right. So this would be perfusion in excess of ventilation, and that is a shunt. That will be a shunt unit. And one more. What if I have a 1-to-1? What if it is 1-to-1? What will we call that one? In the chat. Okay, iPhone good. Michaelin good. Good, Cassidy. Good, Lori. Look at it again, Kelsey. If it was down to 1, the ventilation was down to barely anything, and the perfusion was down to barely anything, that is called a silent unit. No perfusion, no ventilation, or very little perfusion, very little ventilation. That's a silent unit. All right, last one, and we'll take a break. Finally, if I have a VQ of 4 to 5, what is that? Good, Charisma. Good, Stephanie. Good, Kelsey. Lori, good. Michaelin. Cassidy, iPhone. Charisma. All right. So that's a normal unit. Normal VQ is 4 to 5. That will be a normal. All right, so now it's time to classify this in types of breathing. Okay? How would I classify this in one word when it's pertaining to the type of breathing that they're doing? If they have a VQ of 4 to 5, what can I say their breathing is?
Eupnea?
Huh?
Is it eupnea? Eupnea?
Yes. Eupnea. Or eucapnia. Eucapnia. Because we're talking about ventilation, right? Eucapnia, normal CO2. So look how we put it together. A VQ of 4 to 5 is a normal unit, right? It is eucapnia, So if I, can you cut your volume down? Okay. Eucapnia. So if they have eucapnia, then what can I say the patient's PaCO2 is? If they have a VQ of 4 to 5, I can assume their PaCO2 is between what?
35 to 45.
45.
35 to 45 millimeters of mercury. See that? So you might have a question that says, Mr. Smith came in, he had a VQ of 4 to 5. Which one of these is true? Well, his normal unit, yes. Eucapnic, yes. 35 to 45, yes. Right? You got to know that all of these mean the same thing. You got to be able to relate those, right? You got to be able to relate those. Oh, okay. Well, then that means he's probably showing eupnea, which is normal breathing pattern. His CO2 is showing eucapnia, which is normal CO2 numbers, right? And I can assume his CO2 is between 35 and 45. Okay. All right. So we're gonna take a break. It is 1:45. Come back at 1:55. 10-minute break. We are back from break. I'm about to ask a quick question in the chat to make sure you guys are able to understand the relationship between FRC and compliance and different diseases from the lecture from Friday. So here's the question. I'm gonna put it in chat myself here, everybody. Mr. Smith had a PFT with which showed FRC of 4.0 liters. What condition is he suffering from? All right, sending that in the chat. I'm looking for disease. Not looking for numbers. I'm looking for disease. You can tell me some specific diseases, or you can group them however you want to, whatever what's best for you, but there's not a one answer, but it is one. Okay, Lori, good. One of those, that's fine. Okay. Good, Christian. Charisma, you have to look at yours again. Good, Brittany. Good, Kenya. Good, Michaelin. You're relating FRC and diseases and how they go hand in hand, because we learn about FRC, we learned about compliance, we learned about different diseases, what they cause. You got to be able to group them together. You got to be able to understand how to make a diagnosis by looking at pulmonary function results. So the answer is, if you put C-BABE diseases, that would be fine. If you put obstructive disease, that would be fine. Okay. Shatara, I'll take hypoventilation, because that's the same thing as saying hypoventilation will cause hypercapnia, right? And patients who have obstructive diseases are hypercapnic, because I can put those together. I can relate them, right? That's how you have to do. So good. We said FRC is directly related to compliance, right? You got to first know what the regular FRC is. FRC should be 2.4, right? If it's 4, that means they're not getting the air out. That means they have some type of obstruction, which is one of the, you could say they had one of the CBA, which is cystic fibrosis, chronic bronchitis, asthma, bronchiectasis, or emphysema. Or if you said obstructive disease. If you said ARDS, that's a restrictive disease. ARDS is restrictive. They will have a lower FRC. Pulmonary function test. That's how we get these values on the board. IRV, ERV, VT, FRC, RV, those come from pulmonary function tests. Or we can get some of them from bedside spirometry, right? We can get tidal volume and minute ventilation by simple bedside spirometry using what? Somebody tell me, how do we find out the tidal volume? Respirometer, good. Wright's respirometer, right? We showed you that metal little device that can bedside, can check your minute ventilation or the tidal volume. But something like RV and vital capacity, that's going to be in something a little bit more sophisticated, okay? Which would be in a body box or some type of pulmonary function test, okay? So good. Most of you guys were able to relate FRC and a disease, okay? So you got to pull them together. And when you're studying, tell yourself, okay, well, I know this is compliance is high on this, so that means he could have any one of these diseases, but not these, right? And I could have went the other way. I could have said he's suffering from emphysema, okay? This patient is, Mr. Smith has emphysema. What do you expect his FRC numbers to be? And you would say greater than 2.4, right? Because if he has emphysema, that is a CBA disease or obstructive disease. That means his FRC is going to be higher than normal. And you can also say he has a high compliance, right? So it could be a multiple. So you've got to be able to relate this. This is, now you're becoming a therapist, not somebody who's memorizing numbers. You're becoming a therapist when you can relate and use these interchangeably to understand your patient's condition and whether it's getting better or if it's getting worse. What's causing it? How can we fix it? Right? That's what we're doing now. All right, so we talked about ventilation to perfusion. All right, we said we already know 100 times a day that external respiration is gas exchange between the alveoli and the capillaries. Internal respiration will be gas exchange in the tissues, down in the tissue level. And what's happening during respiration is carbon dioxide leaves the blood and oxygen enters the blood. That's respiration. Respiration, aka gas exchange, right? Respiration, aka gas exchange. That's what's happening. And that happens externally in the parenchyma of the lungs or internally at the tissue level. Now, we're going to talk about another ratio that is not necessarily a ratio. It's a division problem. It's a quotient. Okay, respiratory quotient. Not hard to remember. The bottom line is that you need to make sure you know the definition of respiratory quotient is the unequal exchange of carbon dioxide produced by the oxygen utilized, right? Simple. We use oxygen and we produce what? Carbon dioxide. Okay, when we look at the amounts, that's the respiratory quotient. Right? That's the respiratory quotient. So what they're saying is, look right here at the number here. If you look at this, it's saying that for every 250 milliliters of oxygen that we use, we produce 200 mLs of carbon dioxide. For every 250 mLs of oxygen used, we produce 200 mLs of carbon dioxide. When you say, well, mLs, How is oxygen in milliliters, right? Or whatever. You're going to learn that oxygen is transported a couple of ways. And one way is dissolved in the plasma as a milliliters, right? But bottom line is the respiratory quotient is simply for every 250 mLs of oxygen that the body uses, it will produce 200 mLs of CO2. So that 200 over 250 is 0.8. So the normal respiratory quotient is 0.8. That's the RQ. Don't confuse it with the VQ. I know they both will end up being 0.8 because VQ is 4 to 5, right? And if you do the division, it would be 0.8, but don't confuse the two. VQ is ventilation to perfusion. RQ is the unequal exchange of carbon dioxide produced versus the oxygen that you used, okay? And how does this happen? What it's telling you right here, look at B. 200 mLs of CO2 are produced by 250 mLs of oxygen due to the normal metabolism in the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle. Remember, the Krebs cycle is something to do with your mitochondria in the cell. The mitochondria is the workhouse of the cell, and it converts energy into ATP and all of that kind of stuff. That came from your biology or whatever you did, either in gen eds or in high school. We talked about the Krebs cycle. If you want to know more about it, you can look up the Krebs cycle. Now, these pages might not be correct in the CARC book, but if you look up in the index Krebs cycle, it'll take you there in the CARC book. All right, if you want to look up more. You don't have to know how it's produced. You just need to know that what it is. All right. But when we utilize carbohydrates, when we eat carbohydrates and we eat sugars and all of that, the body burns the carbohydrates for your energy, right? We burn carbohydrates and oxygen. And when we do that, we produce a byproduct, which is carbon dioxide. Okay, this is how that is happening, because we already know, yeah, we breathe in oxygen and exhale the waste product of metabolization, which is CO2. But how does that CO2 become CO2? Because of the respiratory quotient. So your diet is very important. Okay, if you have a diet high in starches and carbs, you're going to produce more CO2. Okay. If you've got a whole lot of carbs that you're taking in, then you will produce, it can affect your respiratory quotient, okay? It can affect your respiratory quotient. All right. So the RQ, which the normal value for RQ is 0.8, right? 0.8. And it is the unequal exchange of CO2 versus oxygen uptake or use. Okay, very important, because you're going to need to know what the RQ is, be able to recite that, and not only memorize what it is, but be able to tell me, what does it mean? Okay, you told me that, but what does that mean, right? Got to take things a step deeper now that you're becoming a therapist, okay? All right. Then we get into the gas exchange units, which we've already done. But here it is if you wanted to see it. You can record, go back and pause it and look at it. But the normal unit is alveoli with capillary relationship between ventilation and blood flow are equal. Normally, right? 4 to 5, that's perfect. VQ of 4 to 5 is a normal unit. But if I have a dead space unit, that is ventilation without or in excess of perfusion. Ventilation without or in excess of perfusion is dead space. So the dead space is like having a big Walmart full of product. It's open, but nobody comes, right? You spend all this money to stock your store. The doors are wide open and full, but nobody comes to get it. So that means all that stuff you just bought is wasted, okay? Wasted ventilation. That's ventilation in excess or without perfusion. That's dead space. All right. And then shunt is just the opposite. When we have perfusion without or in excess of ventilation, right? You got the blood, but you don't have the ventilation. That's a shunt. So think about the store again. This time, the store is closed, but the line is wrapped around the building. All the people are there, but the store ain't open, right? So we have to return home without the product, okay? That's a shunt. Think of shunt and shut. Shunt and shut, right? In a shunt, the alveoli is shut. So when the blood gets to the alveoli, it returns to the heart void because it has nothing to pick up because the alveoli doors were closed. Okay? And then silent unit, of course, is no perfusion, no ventilation. No perfusion, no ventilation. It's silent. Nothing happening. All right, last little bit is the regional differences in perfusion. The regional differences in perfusion. When you say, okay, when I mean regional, I'm talking about the top part of the lungs, which are the apices, or the bases. Where do you think most of the blood is going, and where do you think most of the oxygen is going? In the lung, right?
To the base.
Well, that's what we're getting ready to see. There's a couple of different ones that you need to know. Now, as far as ventilation is concerned, you would think that ventilation, air and gas rises, right? But there is 4 times more ventilation to the bases than to the apices. 4 times more ventilation at the base of the lung than it is at the apices. And the 2 reasons. Due to gravity's effect on pleural pressures, and on inspiration, the transpulmonary pressure is greater at the bases. So when we're talking about transpulmonary pressure, that's when your diaphragm flattens, right? The intrapulmonary pressure becomes more and more negative, and it's sucking the lungs open. And at the base, it's going to suck them lungs open more at the bases. As it does that, more oxygen goes in and fills at the bases on inspiration. All right. Now, what about perfusion? Perfusion has more at the bases. It's 20 times more perfusion at the bases than the apices, purely due to gravity. Just the simple fact that you're sitting up, all the blood in your lungs is mostly at the bottom of your lungs. Those are the regional differences in ventilation and perfusion. So this is why, guys, when we have a patient, when you learn what has ARDS, if I had regular lungs, I know that the ventilation is more, is what, 4 times more? 4 times more at the bases than it is at the apices, because when the diaphragm flattens, it sucks the lungs open from the bottom. So the bottom will expand more than the top. And as it's expanding, it's sucking in air and it's filling up at the bases more. Okay. When it comes to perfusion, simply by sitting here in gravity, the blood will want to matriculate more at the bases, 20 times more than at the apices, purely because of gravity. Okay. Because of gravity. Now, if I have a patient who has ARDS, we put them prone. Okay, we try to put them prone so that the gas will ventilate better across the posterior side of the lungs. You'll learn that later. You don't have to know that now. I'm just telling you. That's what we do to our patients who are suffering from COVID and their lungs have been ravaged by COVID pneumonia. They have now developed ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome, which can kill you. We put them on what's called a rotor-prone bed. Okay, they're on the ventilator and they're laying on their stomach, and the bed turns like a rotisserie chicken. Okay, it'll turn, and then it'll turn them supine, and then it'll go around again and turn them prone, and it does a few turns every hour, and that keeps that lung turning like a rotisserie, right? Trying to maximize ventilation as much as possible. Okay, because somebody suffering from ARDS is suffering from extreme hypoxemia, which is low oxygen in the blood. Okay, hypoxemia, and so we're turning them, trying to maximize the space that is open, because in ARDS we have so much closed pockets of consolidation. It's just little atelectasis closing up everywhere, and it looks like somebody dropped a piece of glass on the ground and it shattered, right? And that's the ground glass appearance. That's how you know they have ARDS. Okay, and so we turn them as much as possible, because there are regional differences when it comes to perfusion and ventilation. All right. Now, yeah, here it is right here. This is the VQ ratio right here. VQ, 4 liters of alveolar minute volume to 5 liters a minute of cardiac output. Overall, 4 to 5 or 0.8. Okay, so that's why I say don't confuse this with respiratory quotient, because it just happens to be 0.8 as well. But you need to know the difference between VQ ratio and respiratory quotient, because respiratory quotient is not a ratio, it's a quotient, it's a division problem. Quotient means divide, right? All right, now this is the last part, which we've already talked about. Well, a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more in depth. Now, we talked about the normal unit, the Deadspace unit, the shunt unit, right, and the silent unit. This is going to talk more in depth of the shunt, all right? Shunting, because we said we have 4 types of Deadspace. Well, there are also a few types of shunts you need to know. We talked about the Deadspaces are anatomic, right? Alveolar, physiologic, and mechanical Deadspaces, right? Well, let's learn the shunting. What types of shunting do we have? Shunting is deoxygenated blood entering the left side of the heart, right? When it gets to the left side, it should be oxygenated. Why is it not oxygenated? Because the alveoli was closed. I had perfusion, but the store was closed. So I didn't get to pick up any oxygen. So I'm returning home without it. All right. These are the types of shunt. Anatomical. Anatomical shunt is normally about 2 to 5% of the cardiac output, because you have bronchial veins that drain bronchial circulation. You have pleural veins that drain pleural circulation, and thespian veins that drain heart circulation. So it's okay. You're going to have some of that blood that's going to leak out into the stream. Okay, about 2 to 5% of that cardiac output will be deoxygenated, just a small amount. Okay, because of bronchial veins, pleural veins, and thespian veins, and how they drain into the circulation. That's normal. It's fine. Okay, nothing wrong with an anatomical shunt. The next one is an absolute capillary shunt. Highlight that one. The absolute capillary shunt is also known as the true shunt. Absolute capillary shunt. That means you got an alveoli that is perfused but not ventilated at all. That alveoli is closed. It's got blood around it, but it's completely closed. That's called a true shunt. Because remember, I showed you guys some VQs, right? Sometimes if it is 1 to 5, we said that was a shunt, right? 1 or 0 to 5, right? 0 to 5. Let's look at it right here because I want you to make sure you understand the difference between a true shunt and just a little mismatch, right? It's not completely a shunt, but it's not really normal either, right? Okay? So that's going to be the next thing. So VQ, if I have a VQ ratio of 0 to 5, that's a shunt, right? You have no ventilation and plenty perfusion. Okay? We can say this is a true shunt. But what if it's 2 to 5? Right? It's still a shunt, but it ain't a true shunt, right? It's not completely a shunt. This will be more of a VQ mismatch. It's just saying that it ain't matching like it should be 4 to 5, right? But if it's 3 to 5 or 2 to 5, it's still trending for a shunt, but it's not a complete shut you down type of shunt. Okay? Not a complete shut down type of thing. So that's what they want you to understand. What we're talking about now is the true capillary shunt or absolute capillary shunt, also known as a true shunt. When you have no ventilation, but plenty perfusion, okay? But when you have a little bit of ventilation, right, it's in excess, I mean, the perfusion is in excess of ventilation, it's still a shunt, but it's not a true shunt. It could be called a VQ mismatch, okay? A little mismatch. It ain't all the way right, but it's not completely wrong, okay? But it's still leaning as a shunt, all right? So let's look at the notes on that. But first, let's get some what you need to know about the capillary absolute shunt. It is refractory to O2 therapy. This 0 to 5 is refractory to oxygen therapy. Who can tell me what refractory to O2 therapy would mean? If it's no.
It doesn't have to do with the O2 coming into the body.
No,
It has to do more with the O2 coming out.
No, refractory
Or
to
CO, I mean,
refractory to O2 therapy means it will not respond to oxygen therapy. Refractory means it don't respond. I don't care how much oxygen you throw at it because the alveoli is not open, right? The alveoli has to be open. You have to have, that's why I said you have to have ventilation before you can have respiration, right? If I fill this room up with 100% oxygen and you hold your breath, you cannot use that oxygen. You cannot participate in respiration because you're not ventilating. Okay, so what they're saying is when that shunt, when that alveoli is completely shut, then I don't care how much oxygen I throw at it, it's not open. The alveoli is closed. So it can be sitting in 1,000,000% oxygen. If it's not opening and sucking that oxygen in, it cannot participate in respiration. So that means refractory. I don't care how much oxygen mask you put on them. I don't care how much liters per minute, the ventilator you put them on. If that alveoli is completely shut, it's over. Okay, that means it does not respond to oxygen therapy. Okay, refractory. So if you say your son or your daughter is refractory to whoopings, that means you can whoop them and they still gonna keep doing it. They don't respond, right? They don't respond. A true shunt is refractory to O2 therapy. We're gonna have to forcefully ventilate them. We have to do what's called recruiting alveoli. We have to put the tube down your throat or put a CPAP mask, which forces pressure into the lungs to pop, 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 and pop them back open, okay? Because they're closed. We can pop them open, but you have to give them ventilation, not oxygenation, right? You have to ventilate them. That means forcing air. Don't forget, ventilation is the movement of air in and out of the alveoli. During that ventilation, we can throw in a little oxygen if you need it, right? Oxygenation and ventilation are two different things. Don't forget that, all right? So in this case, a true shunt will not respond to oxygen they respond to ventilation, right? I have to force air into the lungs to pop them lungs back open, okay? And then the oxygen that is within that ventilation can be used, okay? Understand? All right. So if you have, like I said, if I fill up this, you in your car and you fill up your car with 200% oxygen and you hold your breath like that, you're not taking in any oxygen, right? I don't care how much oxygen around you, it's not benefiting you if you're not ventilating. Ventilation is first, then oxygenation, okay? All right, number 3, that relative capillary shunt. That relative means just a little VQ mismatch. It's that 2 to 5, right? Or that 3 to 5. It's not, it says areas where perfusion is in excess of ventilation. We already know that when there is perfusion in excess of ventilation, it's a shunt, right? But if it's not completely shut, then it's just relative, okay? We can deal with it, all right? We can deal with it. It's just a little mix match. We can fix that, okay? We can fix that. And then the third one is a physiological shunt. And that is when you add anatomical, absolute, and relative shunts. So physiological shunt is the sum of the anatomical plus the absolute plus the relative shunts will be your physiological shunt, your overall shunt, okay? So you have 4 types of shunting: anatomical, absolute or true, relative, and then physiological.
Wait, how would you add those if like, so you can have an absolute shunt and a VQ?
How many alveoli do you have?
500 or no, yeah. How much of them?
I'm up to 600 million.
Yes,
So that don't mean every last one of them are completely closed. You might have a million of them closed, right? So you might have an area of the lung where there are millions of them closed, right? And you might have an area where they're open or they're just relative, right? So you adding all of those together, okay? And the ways to find your shunting and your amounts, those are pulmonary function tests, okay? Because you can't see, oh, that on the x-ray, I see that alveoli right there, it's open. You can't see that, right? There's 600 million of them. Ain't no way you see that. But you can tell by the flows that you get in your pulmonary function test, okay? When you get the PFTs later on in respiratory, you'll learn how they find out these things, okay? All right, what causes shunts? Well, a decrease in ventilation, of course, will cause a shunt, because if I decrease my ventilation, then my perfusion may be higher than my ventilation, which is a shunt. Or an increase in perfusion all of a sudden. If my cardiac output goes from 5 to 8 and my 4 still stays the same, I still got perfusion way in excess of ventilation, right? So if I give a patient blood, right, I may give them blood for whatever reason. Their blood pressure is low, so we give them a unit of packed red blood cells, and now their cardiac output went from 5 to 7 liters per minute, right? Something like that. If you have an increase in cardiac output, then that can cause a shunt, okay? That can be called a shunt because you have ventilation, you have perfusion in excess of ventilation, all right? And then, of course, we talked about dead space. Dead space is wasted ventilation. You see how they keep talking about these two things? They're very important, okay? The dead space, we already talked about that, though. It's wasted ventilation. You got anatomical, alveolar, physiological, and mechanical. We already talked about those. But what causes dead space? Well, an increase in ventilation. If you start breathing way more, then you're going to have some dead space, right? An increase in ventilation. Because then you're going to have ventilation in excess of perfusion. Or if you start losing blood, right? A decrease in perfusion, which is a decrease in cardiac output. What if you get stabbed or shot and your blood start running out? Now your cardiac output went from 5 to 3 or 2, right? That's dead space. That's going to be That's going to be less blood reaching the alveoli, right? Now you're leaning toward a dead space situation because you have less perfusion. The blood is leaking out of your body. So now, or you're bleeding internally, right? And so now you have less blood getting to the alveoli. When you have ventilation in excess of perfusion, it's ventilation. I don't care how they tell you guys. Remember this. Ventilation in excess of perfusion is dead space. I don't care how they put it. Okay, you should be able to figure that out. But whatever you're looking at, whatever values they're giving you, if my ventilation puts me, or whatever I'm doing, makes my ventilation in excess of perfusion, I'm leaning at a dead space situation. If whatever I'm doing, my ventilation or my blood has my perfusion in excess of ventilation, I'm experiencing shunt. Okay, perfusion in excess of ventilation, I'm experiencing a shunt. I don't care how they mix it up. Okay, just look at the values and say, okay, is this making my ventilation more than my perfusion? It's a dead space. Or look at my values and say, okay, is this making my perfusion greater than my ventilation? Now I'm leaning with a shunt. Okay, don't let them trick you with the way they may put it. That's the bottom line, right? It's like tying your shoe. Shoes are shoes. I don't care what brand it is. You tie your shoes the same way. All right. Now, this is another effect here that they want you to be able to understand. Dead space. What will dead space do? Dead space will decrease your alveolar minute ventilation if your minute ventilation remains constant. Okay? It says if you increase the dead space, bottom line is if you increase the dead space, you want to decrease the alveolar minute ventilation. You increase the dead space, you're going to decrease the alveolar minute ventilation. I'm about to show you how. Mr. Smith is 150 pounds, has a tidal volume of 500 and a frequency of 12. What is his alveolar minute ventilation? First, tell me what is his alveolar minute ventilation, and now I'm getting ready to show you how what I just said is true. So first of all, Michaelin, what is the formula for alveolar minute ventilation?
Frequency times tidal volume minus dead space.
It's tidal volume minus dead space times frequency.
So, Talisha, what is his tidal volume?
500.
500. Somebody tell me, what is his dead space?
150.
150, because dead space is 1 cc per pound. He's 150 pounds, so his dead space is 150. All right, somebody tell me, what is his frequency?
350.
Frequency, his respiratory rate.
12.
12. Good. All right, 500 minus 150 is what? 350.
350.
Good. Times 12. Now I can do it like that and change it after the over, or I can change it now and just put 0.350. So 0.350 times 12 is what?
4.2.
4.2.
4.2 liters. That is his alveolar minute ventilation. Now the problem said if I increase the dead space, then I'm going to decrease the alveolar minute ventilation as long as the minute ventilation stays constant, the regular, as long as he's still breathing the 500 and the 12, right? As long as that stays constant, if I increase the dead space, I'm going to drop my alveolar minute ventilation. I'm going to show you. Say I add I add 100 cc's of tubing. Add 100 cc's of tubing to his breathing circuit, right? This type of dead space is called what?
Mechanical.
Mechanical. So now I have added 100 cc's of mechanical dead space to this problem. All right. So we still got, let's look at it again. Okay. You said alveolar minute ventilation is tidal volume minus the dead space times frequency. Well, tidal volume is 500. Right? Now, minus the dead space. Well, it was 150, but now that we added some more, now what's the total dead space? 250. 250 times the frequency. 500 minus 250 is what?
250.
250. So 0.250 times 12 is what?
3.
3 liters. So see how it went from 4.2 to 3? It dropped. It's what it's saying. If you add dead space, you want to drop your alveolar minute ventilation. See? So now by adding more dead space, I'm reducing the amount of gas that's actually taking place in gas exchange. Okay? That's why you got to watch it with the dead space. Okay? You can't have grandma on the ventilator or her ventilator, because y'all don't like to hear it. The ventilator's in the garage and you got 700 feet of tubing leading all the way into what grandma likes to watch, Days of Our Lives. Okay, you don't want to hear the ventilator, so you got it way in the back upstairs and you got tubing coming all the way down the step. You are adding to her dead space and she's not going to be respirating right. Okay, her respiration is going to be low. Her alveolar minute ventilation is going to be very low. Okay, very low. All right. I think that's it. That is the lecture for pulmonary mechanics. Now I want to go over this lung volumes ventilations worksheet. I know I gave it to y'all. Want to make sure y'all got this. If you got this, you can pull it up. If not, we can look at it together. But I want to make sure you understand. Now, on this side is volumes. On this side is minute ventilation. This look on screen. You got to
Yeah.
All right, here you go. This is the ventilation worksheet. On this side, I'm only asking for volumes, just straight up volume. And on this side over here, I want the minute ventilations. Okay, this is when you multiply by frequency over here. Over here, I just want the volume. Okay, so let's look at numbers 1 and 2 together. You might already have this. I'm pretty sure I gave this either in your homework or somewhere. Probably so, with the little picture on the back. Second page, yeah. What was that part of it? Was that in your homework?
It's in the module, it's tidal volume.
Oh, okay.
Ventilation worksheet.
Okay, yeah. So it's in the module, the tidal volume ventilation worksheet. I don't think I might not have assigned it to you. But this is what we're going to do tonight for homework, okay? This is what you're going to do tonight for homework is this ventilation worksheet. On this side, we're going to do 1 and 2 together, and you can do the rest at home. On this side, I want volume, and on this side, I want minute ventilation. What you're going to do is read the question and figure it out. Now, it's for the first one says, assume a frequency of 15 and they weigh 180 pounds. And it says, and all other values are normal. So just assume everything else is normal and calculate these things right here, okay? Remember this thing here, guys. Always use what they give you. Okay, make sure you always use what they give you. I don't care what the formula is. If they give you the tidal volume in the problem, use that. Don't try to say, you know, when they give you the tidal volume, then they ask you what's the tidal volume. Oh, I need to do 3 cc's per pound, right? Use what they give you. If they tell you the person's tidal volume is 500, and then they ask you what's the tidal volume, 500, right? You use what they give you. Always use what's given. It's like algebra. They always say given, right? Use what's given and then assume everything else is normal. So let's work on this first one. Assuming the normal values and what's given. It says assume a frequency of 15 and a weight of 180 pounds. And all other values are normal. Calculate the following. All right, I'm gonna get my pen. All right, so let's see here. Charisma. Number one, tidal volume. This one over here. What do you think for tidal volume, Charisma?
Give me a second. 540.
540, good. Because tidal volume is 3 cc's per pound, right? So tidal volume would be 540 cc's. All right. And look, let me tell you this other thing. It's probably easier if you do tidal volume and then do dead space volume and then do alveolar volume, okay? Because
Where did you say that worksheet was?
in the module.
I don't see it.
I don't have it either.
It's I think it's different numbers, Mr. McCarthy,
It
because
might be different. Yeah, it's gonna be. It might be. That's what I said. You're gonna do this for homework.
it's in there. You have to print it out.
The one in the module is what's gonna be for homework. Okay, but it's the same type of thing. Might be some different numbers, but look at what I got right here. Yeah, 540. Because remember, tidal volume is 3 cc's per pound, and they weigh 180 pounds. So that's times 3 is 540. Okay. Now, when you're doing these, it's probably best to do the tidal volume and then find the dead space volume before you find the alveolar volume. Because it's easier to just subtract these and get the alveolar volume, right? Because alveolar volume is simply tidal volume minus dead space volume, right? All right. So tidal volume is 540. Let's look at the VD, which is dead space volume. What would the dead space volume be for this one, Stephanie? Is Stephanie with us? All right. Kenya. What would the dead space volume be, Kenya?
Is it 15?
Not 15. Dead space volume is 1 cc per pound, Kenya. Dead space volume is 1 cc per pound. That's the formula. So what would his dead space volume be?
180?
180. So VD would be 180 cc's. All right. We know that alveolar volume is simply tidal volume minus dead space volume. So Shatara, what would the alveolar volume be? $360. Alveolar volume will be 360 cc's. All right, so now knowing that, Lori, what is the total minute ventilation on this side? What is this patient's minute ventilation? Yep. Yep. So the minute ventilation would be what? What is that in liters?
Oh, yeah, it's 8.1.
8 point what?
8.1.
8.1. Minute ventilation is 8.1. Okay. Now, knowing that the minute ventilation is 8.1, let's find our alveolar minute ventilation. Let's see here. Brittany, what will my alveolar minute ventilation be?
Hold on.
Alveolar minute ventilation, Brittany.
No, I got lost.
Huh? Don't
I
know?
got lost when y'all got the 8.
All right. Well, we already got the volume over here on this side. The alveolar volume is 360, right? So to find alveolar minute ventilation, you do 0.360 times the frequency.
Say it again.
What is the formula for alveolar minute ventilation, Brittany?
3 cc's per pound.
Alveolar minute ventilation, guys, is frequency times tidal volume minus dead space. We already found the volume over here, though. We did that when we found the volume. We said the alveolar volume is 360 cc's. So to find the alveolar minute ventilation, you simply multiply by the frequency. So 0.360 times 15, because the frequency is 15. You get 5.4 liters. Alveolar minute ventilation should be 5.4 liters.
Oh, okay, I got that, but I didn't do it that way though.
As long as you do it and get the right answer, you got to do tidal volume. If you did the whole thing, then you did frequency times 540 minus 180. You did the whole thing. You worked it all out. You still get 5.4.
Yes, sir. That's what I did.
Then dead space minute ventilation, guys, is simply minute ventilation minus the alveolar minute ventilation gives you your dead space ventilation. Or you can say whatever the dead space volume is times the frequency, and that'll give you the dead space minute ventilation. So Charisma, what did you get for dead space minute ventilation?
2.7 liters.
That's 8.1 minus 5.4 gives us 2.7 liters. Good. VD is 2.7 liters. See that? That's why you got to know your formulas. So when you're working on these tonight, have your formulas beside you so you can see how to get them. But once you get the volumes, it should be easy to find the minute ventilations. You just simply multiply by the frequency. All right. All right. Number 2, and then we're going to take a break and come back and do our online game. All right. Number 2 says assume a frequency of 30 and they weigh 80 kilograms. And all other normals are normal. Calculate the following. On this side, I want just volumes, and on this side, I want minute ventilations. All right, Courtney, are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Courtney, what do you get for a tidal volume of this patient?
528.
528. Hey, excellent. 528 cc. She did that because tidal volume is 3 cc's per pound. This patient weighs 80 kilograms. So we have to convert this 80 kilograms into pounds, which is 80 times 2.2. 80 times 2.2 gives us 176. Then we take the 176 times 3, and it gives us 528. Excellent. All right. Heather, you with me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Heather. What about the dead space volume? What is this patient's dead space volume?
Is it 176?
176. Excellent. 176. We just found the pounds. Once you find the pounds, that's it, right? All right, now, alveolar volume, Christian. Are you with me, Christian? That's what she says. It's CCs. All of it is CCs. All the volumes is in CCs. I don't think Christian is with us. Cassidy. Dead space volume, Cassidy.
176.
Yeah, good. I'm sorry. I meant to ask you, what is the alveolar volume, Cassidy?
Oh, that's 352.
352, because she did 528 minus the 176 leaves us with 352. And now on this side, we simply multiply by the frequency for each one and get the minute ventilation. So over here, what is the total minute ventilation? Kiara, you with me, Kiara? All right. Maria, you with me, Maria? Maria. Okay. Shatara. What is the minute ventilation for this patient, Shatara? Minute ventilation is frequency times tidal volume. You already found the tidal volume. You multiply by the frequency. And you can use a decimal point, whatever the tidal volume is. $15.8, good. So it is 15.8. 15.8 for the minute ventilation, which is frequency times tidal volume. Tidal volume was 528. She did 0.528 times 30, and she got 15.8. Good. What about the alveolar minute ventilation? Who else? I'll make sure I'm calling everybody. Let's see here. Kelsey. What is the alveolar minute ventilation, Kelsey?
Just a second. Is it 10.5?
Good. 10.5. All right. Dead space minute ventilation. Lori, what is the dead space minute ventilation? .28. Good. That's cool. 5.3, whatever one. Good. So that's how you do it, guys. That's how you do it. Yeah, but you got to do them tonight, though, so you don't forget. You don't do them tonight, you're going to forget. All right. So let me show you one thing right here. Look at number 5. We don't have to do it all, but I want you to see. Use what's given. In this problem, what is the tidal volume?
750.
750. So don't go trying to do his pounds times 3. Okay. They give you the tidal volume, you use it. They said the tidal volume is 750. So you use 750 right here off the bat. Don't say, oh, well, he 160 pounds. That's 160 times 3. Right? You're going to be wrong. Okay. Yeah, they don't give you the dead space, so you use what you need to use to find dead space. I'm just telling y'all to use what they give you. Don't try to overdo it. Don't try to figure something out that they already gave you. Okay. Like number 6, it says given a tidal volume of 1,000 cc's, then you use 1,000 right here. Now, this is what you also need to remember. When you have 1,000, you don't do 0.100 when you're multiplying by the frequency. It's just 1. So 1,000 cc's will be just 1. All right, so if he has a frequency of 16, look right here. He has a frequency of 16. His tidal volume will be 16 times 1, which is 16.0. I'm not his tidal volume, his minute ventilation. His minute ventilation, which is frequency times tidal volume. Whenever you have 1,000, you got 4 digits there, right? It's not just 3, like 5 something, 680, whatever. These are 4 digits. Whenever you have it, you cannot put 16 times 0.1000. You can't do that. You have to do just 1. Anytime it's 1,000, it's just 1. Okay? When 1,000 like that, it's just 1. Okay? All right. All right, so yeah, you're gonna work on these for homework. So I'm going to load that up to the you got one already in the module. Do the one that's in the module, and I'll make it due. Right? I'll set it up to where it has a due date so you can turn it in. All right. Let's take a break. It's 2:55. Come back at 3:10. 15-minute break. Come back at 3:10, and we will do our online game, and then we're going to wrap it up. Test tomorrow.
Stephanie just texted me and she told me to let you know that she's sick, throwing up. That's why she's not on video.
Okay. Where's my? Oh, calls record. All right, guys, we're back. We're back from break, and now what I want you to do is to log into this right here. I'm gonna log into something called Cahoots. All right, I want everybody to log in. Follow the prompts. It's gonna let you. It's probably gonna pick a little friendly nickname for you, like Too Fast and stuff like that, or whatever. You can put your own name in there. Either way, it's fine. But this is what it looks like. What you're going to do is you're going to go to www.kahootit, and you're going to put this number right here in, 492-6792, and it's going to let us know when you start logging in. When we get everybody logged in, I'm going to push start. It's going to ask you a question, give you a certain amount of time to answer the questions. All right? It's going to keep up with the score. It's going to keep up with the score. Okay? Now, I hope everything works right, because one time I did it and they couldn't see the answers and all of that. It's 18 questions. The person who gets the highest score will have free homework for the night. Okay, so I had to put something in there for you to say I received my homework pass. You push yes, so it can show that you were in attendance. Okay. All right, so I got one person in. Happy Swan, Flying Wildcat. So just log in, and it's going to there we go. Got 4 people in so far.
Hold on, it keeps telling me I have to add extensions and all this stuff.
Go to Google and then log in. Go to Google and go to www.kahootit, and it's going to ask you for the gaming ID. Put this number 492-6792 in it. It'll lead you to my game. You don't have to stay on Zoom if it's not letting you. If you can't do Zoom and this at the same time, that's fine, as long as you in on the game. Okay, I'll let you know who the winner is. It's gonna tell me who the winner is. I got 5 people: Smart Urchin, Diligent Bat, Helpful Buffalo, Flying Wildcat, Happy Swan, Balanced Ferret. Yeah, it might take a little time. I got a lot of people trying to log in, so I'm not in a hurry. Got 7 people in. Need about 6 or 7 more. I got that on here. But once we get started, if you're on here and you're trying, I mean, if you're not even watching us right now, then you won't be a part of it. Start the recording. We have just completed the Kahoot game. Nice little something to do for a review. We had 1 winner, 2 runners up. They were right neck and neck, tit for tat the whole way. So I know you guys wanted to pop and lock and twerk so bad to that music, but I don't know if that got your mind off of it, but you did good. I'm proud of you. Tomorrow's the exam. Don't forget, Alpha students can be here at 1. And if you're an Omega student, you want to come in a little early, you can start coming in around 2-ish to go and get it knocked out. There is no lab. It's simply tests. Be dressed out and come take your test, and you can go home. We will start the next lesson, which is, I think, blood gas chemistry, ABGs, coming up next. Have a good day. The homework has been added to the module. It is the volumes and minute ventilations worksheet and homework number 5. I had put 4, but I meant to put 5. But I already changed it in the module. So it says homework number 5 and that ventilation worksheet. Do it. Make sure you go over it well, because the test will have some of that on there. Okay. And good job and good luck for tomorrow. Have a good day. It's storming outside, so be careful if y'all leave here. It's storming outside. All right. Have a good day.